Hello, my name is Andrew Romans, and thanks for joining Fireside with a VC. I've got the great pleasure of talking to someone I've known for a very long time, Nic Brisbourne. Nic, actually, I remember you worked for Reuters Greenhouse, which was Reuters' VC fund, working for John Taysom. How long ago was that? When did you start working with John?
1999. So I caught the very tail end of the first internet bubble. In fact, when I joined Reuters Greenhouse, I signed a contract and they said, "Let come to this party." It was our 10th IPO party. We'd made 35 investments. A public portfolio was worth $1 billion already, and it was, like at that time, everything was going to the moon with no effort. And then 4 months later, it was all down around my ears. And by the middle of the 2000s, I was saying my career in venture was 4 months of fun and 5.5 years of pain.
Right. That's probably pretty accurate. I was an entrepreneur back then with the GTX, the Global Tel Exchange, and so we knew John, and we were talking to him about investing in our fund. So I think that's when I first started interacting with you. I often say I like ideally to have a VC on a panel or the podcast or in a book that's got a 12-year experience, that they've seen the 10-year term, maybe renewing to 2. They've seen raising funds, different cycles to get the full story perspective. You're now, in your 21st year or so. So real fast, you were with Reuters Greenhouse, John Taysom, an inventor of the industry and experiencing the tail end of the .com. Then was it Esprit Capital Partners, and then DFJ Esprit, and then Draper Esprit?
Well, so those three were all the same. So we, when I joined Reuters, we were employees of Reuters, investing off Reuters' balance sheet. Then we spun out the fund from Reuters, became Reuters Greenhouse. And I moved from there to what at that point was a team that was part of Cazenove, the investment bank, but managing third-party funds. So we spanned that out, and that, via a couple of name changes, became Draper Esprit. And then I left there in 2013 to found Forward Partners, where we are now.
Okay, so I'd like to break this session up into 3 different clips where I want to talk about Forward Partners, who is a pioneer and a leader in what you call applied VC, and understanding historically applied VC around the world, and then landing on Forward Partners. And then we can have a separate session on meditation, which I think is a hugely important topic, perhaps different audience. And then we'll come back for a third session to talk about, the difference between venture capital in the UK versus the US, Europe combined with UK, and then maybe even touching on what does Brexit mean right now with so many changes happening in the industry. So to get started, again, thanks for joining us. Tell us about the birthing of Forward and what applied VC means to you.
Okay, so we founded Forward in 2013, as I said, but let me put it in a context of maybe 20 years of evolution of venture capital. So when I first started in this industry, particularly here in Europe, capital was scarce. The power dynamic was, it was all the power was with the investor, very little was with the entrepreneur. Kind of best practice in the venture industry with big paneled offices, playing the power dynamic, using that to get maximum leverage in negotiations with founders. And then through the noughties, that power dynamic shifted. I think the internet, blogging opened that up a lot. Suddenly it became easy to see who was doing what in the venture capital industry. A lot of us started blogging. And the mindset shifted. The mindset shifted from one of, you'd be lucky to get a meeting with me, let alone an investment from me, to one of, like, I'm a service provider to you. Like, as a VC, I'm going to work super hard for you, the founder who I've invested in.
So let me just interject to say, like, we went from he who has the gold makes the rules. The power was on the VC side with the supply-demand dynamic of money for chasing good deals. And then now, as more and more venture came out, maybe even EIF, British Business Bank, pumping money into the system, you're saying that the VC needs to present itself more as a services business and fight for why should I let you invest in my amazing startup? What else do you bring beyond your check didn't bounce?
Exactly. So there are two dynamics. One was the supply of capital massively increased in the market. So if you get more capital, then there's more people chasing deals. So you get a shift of power in favor of the entrepreneur. And in parallel, the cost to start a company went down, right? This was when cloud computing started, open source software became a thing. And so not only was there more capital, but entrepreneurs needed less of it. And so those two things compounded to be a significant shift in balance of power in favor of entrepreneurs. And smart VCs responded by rethinking themselves as being in the services business. We service founders. And what's weird is a big part of our service is capital. And what's also weird is that we select to only work with a very small number of customers. But, you shouldn't let those two things confuse you. It's a services business we're in.
By the way, when I like to think of venture capital, sometimes people say, like I heard a VC the other day saying, we work for our limited partners. Let me be clear about that. And he was just being 100% focused on that. I like to think that the limited partners are the shareholders in 7 VC Venture Capital. So my LPs, they're the ones who invested the capital that we are investing. Now we're LPs ourselves, but it's mostly other people's money. They're the shareholders. And I think of the portfolio companies as the customers. And you use that word customer. So it's become a services business that you've got to deliver value to the customer, the portfolio company, in order to get into the best deals to deliver the best returns to your shareholder, the LPs. So how do you do it? So what is the value that Forward Partners brings? How have you structured the business to deliver value to your customer, the portfolio company?
Well, so the big bet we took at the start of Forward Partners was to say, okay, so if we're in the business of servicing founders, then let's figure out what help they need and build a big team of people to deliver that. So if you look at the history, and I don't claim to be a kind of super original thinker in all of this, I was picking up on trends that were happening elsewhere. So 2005, I think First Round Capital was founded, and they were the first fund to say, okay, so we're a services model here, and prior to, in the early noughties, VCs like Fred Wilson, Brad Felt, they were taking the services mindset and saying, okay, so we're in the services mindset. I, as an individual, are going to work really hard for my portfolio companies. First Round Capital took that to the next step and said, the next stage, and said, okay, so let's employ a few people now inside our management company to work for our portfolio companies. And so, they write content which helps the founders succeed. They organize networking events to help the founders network within the portfolio, get peer support. They introduce them to customers. Maybe they build networks with recruiting firms and PR firms. Those are the most common areas of value add from what I call platform VCs like First Round Capital.
And Nic, I think you might augment your description of the historical, because it was Highland Capital in the 90s that actually acquired a headhunting company. So I remember Highland was very Boston. Like when I was an entrepreneur in the mid 90s, we were in DC. You think you'd go to New York for your money? Like that's the financial capital? No, it was Boston or the Valley. Yeah. And so Highland was very Boston. They bought a headhunting company and for free offered staffing services. So you didn't pay your 20, 30% of the first year's assured salary. It was part of what you got with Highland. And so given a choice of like, well, I raise money from Andrew or I raise money from Nic, I'm going to spend Andrew's venture funding on a headhunter, whereas these guys are offering it and we're aligned to make it work, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. So so I didn't know that. And that's a great example. So I talk about First Round a lot because, they have a massive brand. They did it really well. But that's interesting that Highland.
Josh Koppelman was a real entrepreneur too. So I think Josh, as kind of part of the ethos of the company, he understood, I need this, I need this, I need this. And so they managed to build those kind of infrastructures to deliver that value.
Yeah, completely. And they did it so well that a lot of people copied them. If you look around, I think well over half of the top VC funds now have some kind of platform team. Like all the major funds have got. So if I look at here in London, Index, Excel, Balderton, Atomico, they've all got platform teams doing those same sort of things as first round pioneered. But when we came to start Forward Partners in 2013, we're like, oh, okay. So people are employing VC funds, top VC funds are employing people in their management company for the first time to help their founders, but they're only employing a few. And like, why are they only employing a few? Because that's all we can afford from our management fee. And we thought, okay, well, how about if we remove that constraint? Like, what about if we said, actually, who would we have in our management company to help our portfolio succeed if management fee was not a constraint? And we went and spoke with the founders that we had invested in, were thinking of investing in. So, like, what sort of help do you need? And we invest really early, so pre-seed and seed stage, and it was a bit of an eye-opener for us. So the founders, they said to me, Nic, and bear in mind I'd been a predominantly a Series A and Series B investor up to that point. They said, Nic, like your advice around the board is great. Your contacts with other VC funds, people we might hire, customers we might want, all that's super helpful. But like my burning problems are operational in nature. Like, how do I build my website? My Google AdWords account is gone haywire. How do I fix it? How do I launch a new channel? How do I find my first customers as a process? What do I put in my product? These sort of problems, and these are things that you need to solve in order to get to product market fit. And so we said, oh, why don't we can solve those problems? Why don't we set out to solve those problems? And so that's what we did. And again, we were taking inspiration from Andreessen Horowitz, had a similar sort of idea, okay, let's massively expand the value add team that we have to work for our portfolio. Google Ventures are doing it, OpenView Venture Partners also in Boston, actually. We're one of the very early pioneers to work with a much bigger team. Here in Europe, Project A was the other one that got started before us.
Nic, as a fundpreneur, as the founder of a fund, there's a little chicken and egg issue of, Mark Andreessen had an easy time raising money for his fund, so he had the cash of management fee to recruit some of my classmates out of investment banking to do internal and iBanking for their portfolio. You did it differently, though. So you really solved the chicken and egg issue, I believe, with how you managed to pull down a whole team to deliver it. So tell us how you did that, and tell us, what is it? What are the people that you've got in the studio, and what do they do?
Yeah, sure. So that chicken and egg problem is a real big one, and talking to people at Google Ventures in the run up to setting up Forward Partners, I was very cognizant of it. So I got lucky in two ways. We got lucky in two ways setting up Forward Partners. One is we met a guy called Neil Hutchinson, and so he was a high net worth, and he bought into the dream that we had, that you could build a much better venture firm if you take the services mentality to the next step, and as you said earlier, right, we call it applied venture. So it's more than just having a platform to support your portfolio companies. You're applying your whole fund, your whole team to making your company successful, and you can offer just a next level of assistance. But that was all. There was very few people doing it globally, and people were doing it in different ways. So Andreessen obviously had all of his past experience and as an entrepreneur, and the great resources that come with that. Google, again, obviously a very different sort of beast. And so there was not, this was not an established category where I could point to people who have been successful doing it the same way. But Neil Hutchinson was kind enough to believe in our vision, and so he backed us. That's the first thing. And then the second lucky thing was that he had been running something called Forward Labs, which was kind of like a classic incubator. So they were working on their own ideas, and it created a space where entrepreneurs could come, and it was a kind of very creative space with entrepreneurs, developers, designers, and they would all come together, and some good ideas would come out of that, and people could have a lot of flexibility as to whether they work on their own problems, a list of ideas that the Forward Labs guys had come up with. And so there was some good stuff in there, right? And a couple of our good portfolio companies that we have today came out of that. But you know, Neil said to me, look, I need you to kind of come in and put a bit of structure around that for me. And so I looked at that and I thought, that is the genesis of our value add team. You know, there are the designers, the developers, the recruitment people, what am I missing? Growth people.
So you got development, design, recruitment. Even a product development. I mean, you're actually making, like, didn't you have, like, we invested in Boom Fantasy, which does, you know, real time, you know, essentially betting, gambling during a sports event. And I think you invested in a similar one. Didn't you say like you guys made the product?
Yeah. So I think with 20 pre-seed startups now, the entrepreneurs come to us, and you know, they're business-oriented entrepreneur, and kind of 15, 16 of those examples, solo business-oriented entrepreneur. You know, and the rest of the VC and angel markets saying, look, I can't work with you. You need to go and find yourself a tech co-founder. And we said, well, you can of course do that, but rather than kind of go and sell your idea now to a CTO and maybe have to give up half of your company, let's work on it together. Let's validate it. Let's figure out the kind of the shape of what the tech should look like. You know, get an MVP in the market, and then we'll go and find the perfect tech co-founder or CTO to be in this business with you. And so we've done that lots of times. And so, yeah, so our developers build the first version of the product, and then we hire someone to join the team and become the tech lead. And that's a pretty well-honed process for us now.
And because you're not being born out of Google or, you know, my first fund is 1.2 billion, like Mark Andreessen, you had Forward Labs had these people on payroll where they have, you know, customers having them do work, and then you could start to have them do work here. Do you also charge the startup to pay for any of the studio people, or is it paid out of management fee? And Nick, are you actually structured as a 2 and 20 GP LP structure?
It's a few questions there. So most importantly, yes, we do charge, and so
Okay.
we call it our studio team. That's the designers, developers, and so on that work for our portfolio. And we run that as a professional services business. We run it at a small loss on behalf of our portfolio companies, but we do charge. And the primary reason we charge is that brings more resource into Forward Partners, which means we can employ more people and then offer a better service to help our portfolio succeed more. And there's a secondary reason as well, is that when you charge, you know, so we run it at cost, and so we're cheaper to work with, much cheaper than agencies or equivalent price to cheap freelancers probably, but a lot higher quality. And so by charging, then you force a discipline on yourself to be delivering high quality work, force real discipline on your customer to make sure that they've thought through the work that you are going to do for them. And right. So in early iterations, we didn't always charge, and it worked much less well for those reasons.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've seen some guys out of Israel maybe 15 years ago. They had bad IRR and they were failing to raise more LP money, and they were innovating what they called fusion venture capital, where they were saying, we'll invest some capital into your fund and we'll do services that we get paid for. And so they were managing to, and they were big on the alignment was key, that if you're given a choice of paying a dev team in Ukraine or working with Forward right here, the Forward development team, this studio, is aligned and motivated for this to be success, and they're building something bigger.
Yeah, so that alignment is massive. It plays out in a couple of ways. So firstly, you know, we charge in order to be able to have a bigger team and to make sure that the work is worthwhile. But, you know, our raison d'etre is not to make money out of our portfolio companies at all. Like, if you look at the amount that we'll build to our portfolio companies, and then you look at the amount of money that we're going to make from the exits, and it's low single figure percentages, right? Is the amount of money that we make So the amount of money that we make by charging for our studio team work is low single figure percentages of the exits that we're going to get from our fund.
Yeah.
Right. So that is absolutely the only game that counts for us is driving towards that big exit. And so you don't have to worry about forward partners like making the project twice as big or not doing something because it's too small for them. So that's one big alignment, right? And then that's a big concern for entrepreneurs. And then the second thing, which is super helpful, is that if the development team that's working on your product is tied, is in the same room, tied in the same company as the investment team that made the investment, then those developers, they understand your strategy, they understand your product, they understand the goals of your company in a way that you just won't get working with other third-party development shops at all. And then the same goes for brand and for growth and for everything else.
And you've been doing this for 8 years now, or?
2013, 2007 years.
Yeah. And so you may even see, I would anticipate to see a population of engineers from the studio start to become entrepreneurs themselves if they're so closely tied to product-driven companies and have a relationship with the investment team. Have you guys spawned any, and you're doing seed, pre-seed, and seed. Have you seen any companies emerge out of the studio?
We haven't seen any companies emerge out of the studio, but what we have seen is people from the studio join our portfolio companies.
Right, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and sometimes at an early stage to become co-founders.
Okay.
And that's actually one of the great things about working in the studio team is that, like, if you're a developer or growth person or any of those roles, and your ambition is to found a company or to work in a successful startup, then Forward Partners is a great place to spend some time because you get to see many startups, you get to understand how investors think, and that massively improves your chances of making a good choice when you pick a startup if you're going to work at.
Yeah, well, I think without a doubt, the number one cause of death for a startup is running out of cash, right? And you either get your cash from customers, so revenue, or investors, and those getting government grants in normal times are not interesting to guys, like us. And it raises the question of what makes most sense to do in-house or outsource, and should I outsource some functions of my business that I eventually bring in-house, right? And I think that for you guys playing in I do know the London scene, as you know, that the number of high quality players in the seed and pre-seed stage, a lot of them, especially in the Valley, they don't have 20 years of venture capital experience. They made their money on Google stock options or something, and then started angel investing at scale, got lucky, and now investing other people's money. I still wouldn't underscore the value that you bring on being able to introduce them to Simon over at Draper Esprit and be able to walk them in to, a lot of the later stage guys to keep investing, while at the same time in the early days saying what critically could be outsourced and de-risked because these are, snipers that can do the mission, as opposed to take a risk on, a technical co-founder who hasn't done this.
Completely. And so two thoughts. So firstly, like, I talk much more about the studio team than I do about what we call the investment team, because that's what makes us different. And also I think that's the interesting thing from the perspective of students of the venture capital industry. I think, that is the natural evolution for the venture industry as a services business, is to be offering more and more complete services. And so what we're doing, Andreessen doing, Google doing, Project A, that we call applied venture, that for me is the very obvious and logical next step. However, what is also critical is that we are a first-class investment team as well. And so we need to be as good as any other seed fund at sourcing deals, at winning deals, at being effective around the board table, and that includes making introductions to next round investors. So that's absolutely critical. And that I look at that and think, like, we're as good as everyone else in London, hopefully better than some. But what we have on the studio side, that's what really makes us different, right? Nobody else is doing that.
Well, it's got to be a small club of individuals in London that have been investing since 1999. I think I probably know more of them than I do the new ones. If they allow me to travel again, I have 4 free nights in the hotel that I left early in March to get back here. So I had to negotiate harder than a Series A, actually, to get those vouchers back at a South Ken place. But is there anything else we didn't cover on applied VC, Nick, or did we cover the big points?
We covered the big points. I just want to close by saying, I really think that it is the future. It's a complicated model to adopt because there's more designers, developers, and so on working at forward partners than there are investors, and so that means that we have to think very differently about our culture, how we manage our business in a traditional venture firm. But my strong belief, and hopefully the early results of forward partners are evidencing this. My strong belief is if you take on that challenge and you crack it, then you're setting yourself up for future success.
Yeah, I even thought about putting it on the website, and I thought it was just a little too aggressive and could be seen as negative to say, if we can't add value, we don't invest. Like making that statement. If we can't help you other than just the check, we're not going to do it. We don't want to have a reputation of, hey, the check didn't bounce, the check was good, but never heard from them again. You want to be adding value. And I think how you add value is different at each stage. I think what you're doing is spot on for pre-seed to seed in getting in to for those first iterations.
Yeah, completely. So you mentioned earlier on the things which it makes sense to outsource change, right? And so one of the easiest and best examples is support with brand. When you're at the pre-seed and seed stage and even early Series A, you're too small to have a proper brand function in-house. And so, you need support from somebody else for that. By the time you're Series B, Series C, you're going to have that in-house and be able to use agencies effectively.
And what does it cost? Having a young guy with an entrepreneur with an investment decision of 25,000 a month PR, that made sense in 1998. It doesn't make sense now, right? So each one of those decisions is an investment decision as well. To tie in the investment team with 20 years experience is good. But listen, Nick, I suggest we keep it short. Let's end it there, and when we come back, we're going to talk about. Do you want to make a closing comment?
Well, I just want to add one so we just launched, and this is another thing that you can do as a venture firm when you have a studio team. So we've launched a new investment product that's we call it Forward Advances, and it's part of also the services mentality that we have. And so it's for entrepreneurs that want to, at the moment, have 10,000 to 50,000 pounds from us, and they pay it back as a percentage of revenues over a 6-month period. So in the States, NDVC, Clearbank have got products like this, and so that is something which we've launched in out of Forward Partners a couple of months ago, and just want to get that out there because I'm telling the world about that.
Give me a granular example of how does that work?
So just on Friday, we advanced £40,000 to I probably shouldn't name them, but they are a company in the SME software space. And so we advanced them £40,000. They will pay us back, I think it's 8% of their revenues until they've paid us back £40,000 plus a fee. And so on their target revenues, then that'll pay us back over about 6 months, and then they're done. So we take no options. We're not on their balance sheet as debt. There's no covenants. It's a super simple, super easy way for them to raise money.
That's very interesting. So it sounds like a derivative of venture debt in a way. They get some cash up front. There's an interest rate plus a payment schedule, or is it purely it's only paid as a percentage of the revenue?
Only paid as a percentage of the revenue. So we take the amount, we add a fee. So in this case, it was 10%. So 40 grand, we added a £4,000 fee, and then they pay that, and then they pay us a percentage of revenue until we've got 44 grand. And if they have a killer month, but no equity, no nothing. If they have an amazing couple of months, they might pay it back early. If they have a terrible period, then they might pay it back every year or never, right? And so if their revenues fall to zero, they don't owe us anything. Okay,
so what's obvious about that is they only make the payments when they can afford to do so. It's interesting. Well, good. All right, Nick, let's stop there and we'll come back and talk about meditation. I need to get a little centered before we do that.
Nice.